Hello, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec podcast, where we triple your impact per engineer. As always, I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, advisor and consultant to tech execs worldwide, and our subject today is vulnerability for growth. And I'm going to start by saying I hate saying the word vulnerability, so pardon me for not using it throughout the episode. But I think, having talked to many executives, having helped and coached many people over the last few years, that we have to realize that no matter how good we are at what we do, if we're not willing to put ourselves out there, to be exposed, to say when we're not sure of something, to say when we will benefit from some help, or we made a mistake, or we really don't know whether this idea or this move was the right one, whatever, if you're not willing to show others that you're not perfect, you're not going to grow as fast as you can. And accepting this need of vulnerability is extremely important if you want to become a high performer, if you want to ensure that you grow faster than your organization, and in general, if you want to be at the top of your industry. And I always say life is too short to aim for average. Now, this sort of vulnerability has a lot of different possible manifestations that you need to be aware of. For example, when I look at the things that matter to me the most, I cannot stand when I'm working with someone one-on-one as their advisor, as their coach, and what ends up happening is that they withhold information from me. They don't tell me how they feel. They don't tell me that they have been feeling stressed or that they feel like they made a mistake. When they just sit on things, even in our own one-on-one communication, the safe space they have. Because, if we're not honest and candid there, how much are you going to grow? And another case that you need to be considering is whether you've been tainted by success. If things have been going well for you so far, we sometimes get it into our heads that we cannot fail. We cannot show that we're not perfect. We cannot show that we're unsure. And once you do that, you become almost like a statue. You cannot move because any move might be a move that worsens your position. And I just read a nice quote by Steve Jobs where he says that in the grand scheme of things, getting fired from Apple was terrific for him because he was then able to shed the burden of success. All of a sudden, he was no longer this person who was supposedly so successful at things, and he was allowed, this is mentally, right? He was allowed to fail again. And because he did that, because he could place those bets, because he could be vulnerable again, because he was no longer the Silicon Valley star, he could do things that were crazy, that might have failed, that honestly did fail for years, like Next, which ended up getting acquired by Apple and was the reason for his return, or like Pixar, which was doing awfully bad for years before it finally clicked. And if you're not vulnerable, if you don't have the capacity to ask people around you for help, if you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable with your mentors, with your coaches, you're not going to grow as fast. And you might feel like it might be painful to be vulnerable, but I promise you, it's going to be a lot more painful if you just shut up for the next 10 years and realize then that everyone else have zipped by you. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't yet, do check out my newsletter, the best newsletter online for tech executives, link in the show notes. My new book, Capitalizing Your Technology to Disrupt and Dominate Your Markets, capitalizing.tech for details. And of course, the Leading Edge Club, my free yet closed global community for startup executives. You can get more details in the show notes. Thank you. See you here next week.